So he ended up being killed.
Yeah, so his deception led to his own death. But there's a question there, like I wonder how long he'd have survived if he didn't have deception. And I guess he kind of put himself into a high position through it, which is what put his life in danger, right?
Yeah.
You find that kind of a motif repeated with regards to advisors. You guys remember Polonius that talked about him from Hamlet? He was the advisor who would just ramble on and on and on and never actually ever say anything. I remembered something I completely forgot to tell you guys. I really wanted to tell you when I was talking about Polonius. There's a neat line from him where his son, Horatio, goes to him and he needs advice, some life advice. And he's just, I don't know what to do, Dad. Can you just give me some wisdom? And again, he's the king's advisor. He's a wise dude. And so when he goes to give Horatio advice, he goes on and on and on and never gives him any advice. And then he ends up with this line which just kind of summarizes. He says, to thine own self be true. To thine own self be true. And it's funny because we say that today like it's wisdom. When Shakespeare wrote it, it was supposed to be a joke. In other words, he wrote, you know what, just be true to yourself. Just do what makes you happy, which is no advice at all. And when Shakespeare wrote that, that was funny. His audience recognized that and said, that's terrible advice. That is stupid. And then today we hear that and we're like, yeah, be true to yourself. That's good wisdom. The whole idea behind Polonius is that he never gives any wisdom. He never gets around to saying anything. He's always playing all sides of it to try to keep himself safe. He's being deceptive in the sense that he's not really an advisor in any real sense. He's just a guy who's trying to keep himself alive. So he's being nice to everybody who he thinks he can manipulate, and then, ends up, as we know, and similarly, he ends up getting stabbed behind a curtain, if you remember the story. And so, another character that I keep meaning to mention today, and I haven't, but now I'm going to, is Scar from The Lion King. So compare Scar to Mufasa, which, do you see there's going to be a Mufasa prequel? Man.
Like when they're little? Scar and Mufasa?
Yeah, when they were like Simba's age. Right, exactly. Was anybody asking for that? But Disney was asking for money, so we'll line up for it. But if you compare Scar and Mufasa, big, strong. What happens if Mufasa tells you the truth and it makes you mad? What can you do about it? What's that?
Nothing, he's king.
Yeah, nothing. He's king. He's too strong. He's so strong, he can tell you the truth, and there's nothing that you can do about it if you don't like it. But now compare him to Scar. Scar looks like he's got mange. He's like all skinny and weird looking. He's cowardly. He should be cowardly because the hyenas, the ones he's supposed to control, the hyenas can kill him. We know that because they end up getting around to that at one point. What's that?
That's what he lies to them in the beginning of the movie.
Exactly. And that's why Scar has to use lies, because he can't get his way any other way. He has to be deceptive. And so I've had this quote here for a couple of years because, as we've said a couple of times, it's straightforward. But every time I go over, I feel like we're missing something important with it. I can't quite put my finger on it. Like, we all understand what it means, but there's another layer to it that I'm trying to get my head around. We're saying, like, the weaker you are, the more dishonest you have to be to survive. And you can think of Scar and Mufasa if you're weak. Now, that can be weak in a lot of ways. That can be weak physically, it can be weak emotionally, it can be weak financially, it can be weak psychologically, it can be weak socially. In all of these areas, he says you have to be dishonest to survive, and certainly to thrive. This is why you can't trust weak people. I think that's the crux of it right there. When I come across a person who's weak, I have a really hard time trusting them. And I don't mean that they have to be like big, bad, and strong, or like psychologically tough, or because most people are just average. That's fine. I'm talking about the people who are like Scar level, Going back to what Andrea was saying, when they present themselves as something great and powerful and strong, and yet you know that they're not, or they demonstrate that they're not. Because if they're just kind of like average or even below average, but they acknowledge it, there's a certain strength in acknowledging that. But when you are below and you present yourself as much more, well, then there's something else that you're hiding. That's the thing that concerns me, because I know that you're going to be dishonest. So what can I trust you about? Well, if you're going to be dishonest in one area, you're capable of being dishonest in every area. Now, does that mean that if you lied to your parents, that you're therefore going to lie to your friends? Not necessarily, but it does mean you're capable of it. And that's always the thing that picks up my attention. It's like, so if you're willing to lie to your parents, what is it about your parents that you're willing to lie? What is it about them that you're willing to lie to them? Is it because we see them as being in a position of authority? We see them as being in a position of wisdom? Is it because we respect them and don't want to disappoint you? Well, what if I ever find myself in any of these positions that make it so it's a box that you can check that's okay to lie to? Then that means that you're going to be willing to lie to me as well. Like, let's say we're friends and you lie to your parents because you see them as being in this like position of authority or whatever, and then I start a company and you ask me for a job. Would I ever hire you? No, of course not. Not if I'm wise, because the second I hire you, you now kind of promote me to that position of being in a position of authority over you because you're working for me. So if you're willing to lie to your parents because they're in a position of authority over you, then you're willing to lie to anybody who's in a position of authority over you. And you might say, I wouldn't, okay? Just like your pit bull wouldn't kill you, but is it capable of it? Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. The question is going to be, how much do you want to trust the pit bull? How much do you want to trust the person who you know is a liar? Who's going to lie to you in their own mind to save their own skin? It takes a lot of courage to own up to what you are. And if you're average and you can acknowledge that, fantastic. There's a strength that's there. If you're below average and you can acknowledge that, there's a strength that's there. It's that mask that makes us nervous. That's one of the things that scares us about clowns. They have a face painted on that we know is not their real face. So it frightens us about people who, people who wear goalie masks as they're walking around the city. It's not just because they're a serial killer, but there's that question, why don't you want us to see your face? What is it that you're kind of, hiding back there? Why do you want to be hidden? And so he points out that deception and disloyalty are basically their only means of survival. And notice how he connects those two things at that point. At first, it's just dishonesty. And then he connects deception to dishonesty to disloyalty. So people will tell you who they are, man, without telling you who they are. They'll say what they are, but they're going to show you time and time and time again what they are. Oftentimes we kind of think that we're the exception to it, or we really, really hope that we are. You guys ever taken psychology here? You've taken psychology? Or if you've heard of the Stanford prison experiment? Anybody know what this is? Yeah, it's this. Long story short, at Stanford University, they did this experiment where they set up like a makeshift prison in the basement of the psychology building. And they brought in people who volunteered for the experiment, paid them for it. And then as they came in, they just kind of like randomly assigned, you're going to be a guard, you're going to be a prisoner, all that. And then they just conducted the experiment to see how things would go down. And long story short, the experiment was supposed to go on, I think, for 2 weeks. I think it lasted like 2 days or 3 days or something like that. And it became just like all the worst of what you'd expect. The guards were abusive. The prisoners became submissive, like really like docile almost, really fast. They filmed the whole thing, so you can go and watch the videos of how all this stuff went down. And what was the one that, like there was a guy who they made him do push-ups and then proclaim that he was a bear or something like that. It is like, tell us you're a bear. He's just standing there. I'm a bear, sir. But he's like, not even laughing about it. He's completely demoralized. And so afterwards, they show an interview with one of the guards and one of the prisoners. And again, they were all just students, all peers. And the guy who's one of the guards, he's sitting next to him, and he's got like his hand on his leg like this, and he's like leaning in to the guy. And then the guy who had been the prisoner was like shriveled, like with his shoulders down. And he turns to me, he says, and he's trying to explain the danger of what the experiment shows. And he says, you can see how bad things are going. And he goes, and I know you're a good guy, And there's like this pause. And he's waiting for like an affirmation of like, yeah, I am. And he goes, I mean, I know you're a good guy. And then the guy just goes, you don't know that. Just, you don't know that. And he goes, well, no, I do know that. Does he know it? No. He's hoping. He's really hoping it's going to be different with this person because he has seen what this person is capable of. So he's hoping that that was just an act because it terrifies him to find out that there are people like that in the world. It should terrify you guys that there are people in the world who will shake up sparkling ices and give them to people. But maybe it should terrify that there are way worse people out there than just that. But we oftentimes think, I'll be the exception. Yeah, so I've seen him treat some friends badly. I've seen him, better yet, girls. I've seen him treat his mom badly, but it's not like that with me. Because, she's mean to him, and she's this and she's that. But it's not like me, though. You're right with one regard. It's not like you yet. But it will be. You don't know that. Okay. I want to grab some popcorn. Wait for it. Because it's going to be. It's going to be. Oh, yeah, I've seen him, betray his friends, but he would never betray me. That's different. Mm-hmm. Because here's the problem you make. You think it's about you. It's not about you. If a person is a betrayer, they're a betrayer. It doesn't matter if it's you. It doesn't matter if it's the person next door. It doesn't matter if it's the President of the United States. If they're a betrayer, they're a betrayer. And they will not betray you as long as until they can benefit from it. So maybe the way that you don't get betrayed by someone like that is make it so it's never beneficial. But that's a strange relationship to be involved in. It isn't about you. It isn't that you deserve it. It's just like if the guy hates his mom, it doesn't really matter how great and wonderful you are. Until he resolves that, there's going to be those issues, and they're going to bleed over into all of those kinds of relationships. You don't know that. Okay. Well, one of us is going to find out, aren't we? So, get it through your head, man. It's not about you. It's about them. It's about them being a betrayer, them being violent, them being whatever. You can't control that person. You can hope to heal them, but understand that in that process, man, first off, you probably can't heal anybody, especially if they don't want to be healed. But even if so, there's a lot of pain in that process, man. Maybe there's somebody else around who won't inflict that kind of stuff on you. So, can't trust weak people. And weak people come in all forms. They come aggressive, but they're still weak. They come confidently, but it's a false confidence because they're psychologically weak and so forth. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Neato. Happy Thursday.